Heat, thermal energy, and temperature. We'll start with the definition of heat. Heat is the form of energy that is transferred between two substances at different temperatures. Heat is measured in units of energy, usually calories or joules. There are three ways that heat can move: radiation, conduction, and convection. We'll start with radiation. Radiation is the transfer of heat by way of electromagnetic waves. An example of how heat is transferred through radiation is by the sun. The sun radiates electromagnetic waves that heat the earth. The sun is very hot, so it emits radiation at many different wavelengths. Next, we'll go on to conduction. Conduction is the transfer of heat between atoms and molecules in direct contact. An example of how heat is transferred through conduction is by boiling water on the stove. How conduction happens in this process is twice. First, when the bottom of the pan is in contact with the top of the stove, it heats up the pan, and then it happens when the pan and the water make contact and it allows the heat to flow through. Lastly, we'll go on to convection. Convection is the transfer of heat by movement of the heated substance itself, such as current in fluid or air in this case. Examples of how heat is transferred by convection is by a heater. Convection happens when the air is forced through a heating system like a heater, where the cool air is blown with hotter air, and that mixing causes the cooler air to change temperature to a warmer temperature. Then we will go on to the definition of thermal energy. Thermal energy is the internal energy of an object due to the kinetic energy of its atoms or molecules. Thermal energy is the energy that comes from heat. This heat is generated by the movement of tiny particles within an object. The faster these particles move, the more heat is generated. Examples of thermal energy is making a cup of hot chocolate. When the chocolate and the milk are put in the stove and the milk's temperature rises, this happens because the milk absorbs the thermal energy coming from the stove. Definition of temperature. So we're moving on to temperature, and temperature is a measure of how hot or cold something is. Specifically, a measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in an object. The more kinetic energy the particles of an object have, the higher it is in temperature of the object. Since molecules are so small, you must use an indirect method to measure the kinetic energy of the molecules of a substance. How you measure the temperature is you use a thermometer in degrees of Celsius or Fahrenheit, or in the Kelvin scale. How are heat and thermal energy and temperature similar? Well, temperature, the average kinetic energy of particle, tells you how warm something is. Thermal energy is similar, whereas the kinetic energy of the particles tells you the extent of which a substance or an object can transfer heat or make something else warmer. If an object's temperature increases, the thermal energy increases. Thermal energy or heat of an object is obtained by adding the kinetic energy of all the molecules within it. Now, how are heat, thermal energy, and temperature different? Well, temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles of a substance, whereas thermal energy of the substance is the total energy of the substance. And here, heat is not a measure of energy, but rather of energy transferred. Moving on to Celsius, Fahrenheit, and the Kelvin scale. Well, temperature is measured using a thermometer, of course. It is the most common units of temperature are degrees in Celsius and degrees in Fahrenheit. Celsius is a unit of measurement for temperature, abbreviated as C. At sea level, water freezes at 0 Celsius and boils at 100 Celsius. Fahrenheit, F, is a unit of measurement for temperature, abbreviated as F. At sea level, water freezes at 32 Fahrenheit and boils at 212 Fahrenheit. Scientists also use another method, the Kelvin K, to measure temperature. The Kelvin scale is the temperature scale where absolute zero is the temperature at which the theoretically is no thermal energy present. Celsius versus Fahrenheit. The Celsius scale was created in the mid-18th century. It is part of the metric system and today is the most common form of temperature measurement. Celsius is the official form of temperature used in the vast majority of countries worldwide. English-speaking countries that use the imperial system, such as the United Kingdom, India, and South Africa, use Fahrenheit as their temperature measurement. Today, only 3 countries do not use the metric system, which is the Celsius scale, and that is the United States, Liberia, and Burma.